Although colloquially known as the Alpha Quadrant, and the vast majority of species are associated with said quadrant, the area of explored and inhabited space of the Star Trek universe occupies both the Alpha and Beta quadrants. With the United Federation of Planets, they straddle that line, with one half of its space occupying the Alpha Quadrant and the other half occupying the Beta Quadrant. When looking at the Klingons, the Romulans, and their respective empires, they're found exclusively in the Beta Quadrant, along with the Gorn and the Tholian Assembly, with the other notable factions such as the Cardassian Union, Ferengi Alliance, and the Breen found exclusively in the Alpha Quadrant. But with that said, both the Gamma and Delta Quadrants have their own civilizations and explore space, as seen with the Dominion in the Gamma Quadrant and the Borg in the Delta Quadrant. With that said, they are not as prominent within the lower as the Alpha and Beta Quadrants. Greetings and welcome back to Checkpoint Gaming Star Trek Ascendancy. With this episode, we will be going over the variants that are available to that of standard gameplay that involves the quadrants that are found outside the Alpha Quadrants and the factions that originate from there. With these quadrant game variants, they consist of the Delta Quadrant and the Gamma Quadrant. When playing with the Borg, there are two ways that they can be added into the game. The first way is to discover the Borg through the exploration of the galaxy. The second way is to have the Delta Quadrant connection be present in the beginning of the game. If discovering the Borg, they'd only use the Borg exploration card and have the green Borg symbol on it. But if playing with the Delta Quadrant connection, then use all cards found in the Borg mansion, which includes the Borg exploration card and have the green and red Borg symbols on them. The Delta Quadrant connection will also require the transwarp hub system disk to be placed into the center of the board, being roughly the same distance from every home system, accompanied by it possessing 3 Borg delay tokens. With these Borg delay tokens, they prevent the transwarp hub from rolling to generate a Borg cube on it during the Borg's building phase. But once all of the Borg delay tokens have been removed, the transwarp hub can start rolling to see if it can generate Borg cube. And once placed, the transwarp hub is fixed. With 1 to 2 player games, the transwarp hub should be about 18 inches away from the player's home systems. With 3 or more players, this might not always be feasible. When there are 3 or more players in the game, the side of the Delta Quadrant connection is going to be used. But if playing with 1 or 2 players, then use the Delta Quadrant connection. This will provide an extra challenge for the players, especially when it's a single player game. And with 1 player games, remove any crisis card that refer to a rival player from the exploration deck. As of the writing of this episode, there are 29 of them. We will add a list of these cards within this episode's description. There are also 2 exploration cards that we want to point out, Therian Probe and a game of Chilla. With Therian Probe, only have the first sentence be implemented. With a game of Chilla, decide if you want to play with this card or not. With the Allied exploration cards, when drawn, it will stay with a single player throughout the remainder of the game. On top of that, we're going to say that if the player passes the diplomacy test the first time, the player will not need to roll it again for the remainder of the game. When it comes to that of the Orion Interceptors and the Orion Trader exploration cards, if either one is drawn during the single player game, then the player will get to randomly draw an advancement from any faction that is not in play. Since there aren't any other players in a single player game, the factional trade agreements will not be used. If playing the Vulcans in a single player game, they remove all the Vulcan agenda cards. When it comes to that of single player game, remove the following advancement from the advancement decks, including the unused factions. With the Andorians, remove the Deafening Field, Andorian Ale, and Subspace Interceptors cards. With the Cardassians, remove the Obsidian Order. With the Federation, remove Bureau of Security and Multicultural Collaboration. With the Ferengi, remove the bigger the smile, the sharper the knife, hear all, trust nothing, and whisper your way to success. With the Klingons, remove Covert Saboteurs. Unless playing as the Romulans, remove Spectral Emitter Drones, Tal Shiar, and Tal Shiar Monitoring Posts. But regardless of how many players there are, when playing with the Borg, set up the exploration deck the same way one would set up the system disks. First, the player will need to shuffle all the non-Borg exploration cards, followed by dealing out a number of non-Borg exploration cards that are equal to twice the number of players. From there, shuffle the Borg exploration cards that are being used into the remaining exploration cards. Once shuffled in, place a small stack of non-Borg cards on top of the deck. After performing this, place the Borg console card and cube card somewhere on the table that is visible to everyone. Once placed, have the shuffled Borg tech and command deck placed near it. When it comes to some Borg exploration cards, they will move the nearest Borg cube toward the system that is being explored. If there are multiple Borg cubes in play, but their locations are not connected to the system, move one of the cubes that's physically nearest to the system that is being explored. With most of the Borg system disks, they consist of phenomena, so make sure to separate them from the system disk stack along with all of the other phenomena disks. If playing with the Delta Quadrant connection, then place the transwarp hub into the center of the board. But if playing with the Borg through exploration, then shuffle it into the system disk stack as one would do with a phenomenon. With the nature of the Borg within the game, they are not controlled by a player. This is so that they represent a threat to all those involved, and if at any time the Borg have established 5 spires and are about to place a 6th, then the Borg have defeated the players by them conquering the galaxy. The Borg will also conquer the galaxy if they have assimilated all of the players. In order for the players to achieve victory, they'll need to claim ascendancy, supremacy, or Vulcan agenda victory while holding off the Borg threat. And if there is only one player left who hasn't been assimilated yet, then they will need to achieve victory before they get taken over by the Borg. In a single-player game, the victory condition will be to achieve 5 ascendancy before they get assimilated by the Borg. And for those who wish to have a more challenging game, move the Transworld Pulp closer to their home system at the start of the game. In a 2-player game, the first player to achieve 5 ascendancy will win the game. And if one of the players becomes assimilated by the Borg, then they will use the rules for the assimilated players. It is now their goal to assimilate the other player. With a player's home system, if it gets assimilated by the Borg, they will have been fully absorbed into the Borg collective. This is true even if said player doesn't control their home system at the time of assimilation. As a result of this, the player will have been eliminated from the game with all their ships that remain on the board being removed from play. For each system that they controlled at this time, the control node is to be removed with warp tokens being placed onto the system. The number of warp tokens placed onto the system will be equal to the number of research nodes found on the system in question. This will make the system a level 1, 2, 3, or 4 independent system. These systems can be invaded or subject to hegemony by the remaining players or to be assimilated by the Borg. If the system has a starbase, then leave the starbase in play. When a player has their home system assimilated by the Borg or gets eliminated by their rivals, then they have become one with the Borg. Because of this, they will continue playing by taking over the rest of the Borg turn. And once assimilated, players will remain assimilated for the rest of the game, even if their home system gets taken over by another player. When other players become assimilated or eliminated, they will wait for the next game round in order to take their turn as the Borg. With each assimilated player, each one will receive a different random turn order card. From there, each will take a full Borg turn when play comes back to them. So with multiple assimilated players, the Borg will take multiple turns in a single round. These players are no longer players in the traditional sense. Because of this, when the rules and exploration cards say the player opposite, the player to your right, or pass to your left, they are to be ignored when it comes to that of the assimilated players. When there is only one player who remains unassimilated, exploration cards that have such tech are to be discarded and a replacement card to be drawn. The Borg as a whole will just discard such cards without effect. With ally cards, if only one player is left unassimilated, then the ally card is to remain with said player for the remainder of the game. When the Borg is being used during a game, they, or all players that have been assimilated, will receive a turn order card like any other faction. Since the Borg can never bid on the turn order, they will always receive a random turn order card, which they receive after the connected players have bid on the turn order and selected their cards. When there is no assimilated player, the player possessing the lowest turn order card will draw a card for the Borg and look at it. Once looking at it, said player can choose to keep the Borg turn order secret until it is the Borg's turn. The player who activated the cube will roll their attack dice, and when defending, the assimilated player who possesses the lowest turn order card will roll. But if there are no assimilated players, then the player found to the right of the opponent will roll the dice. With hits that are inflicted by the Borg when there are no assimilated players, then the players whose ships were hit may decide how to go about allocating said hits. But when the Borg is controlled by an assimilated player, then the assimilated player can pick which ship will be hit. But if there are several players who have been assimilated, then the player with the lowest turn order card can choose which ship will be hit. When attacking multiple players, the Borg hits will be allocated between the players one at a time in player turn order until all of the hits have been allocated. Regarding a planetary invasion of a Borg world, if the player rolls fewer hits than there are structures found upon the planet, then the attack will have no effect and none of the nodes will be destroyed. And if there are fewer ships than there are Borg structures, then the player will not be able to reclaim the Borg world. With the assimilated player who possesses the lowest turn order, they will roll the dice for the defending Borg system. If there are no assimilated players, then the player found to the right of the opponent will roll the dice. And since the Borg are classified as a non-playable faction, the Borg's turn or turns during the execution phase are never considered to be a player's turn, even if there are assimilated players. With that said, the Borg will take their turn in turn order when their turn order comes up during the execution stage. The Borg will always receive a turn order card, even if there are no Borg cube currently found in the game. When it comes to the Borg's turn, they will follow the same sequence of actions as a regular player, so they get a build phase followed by the command phase. With the Borg build phase, they don't use tokens to build as a typical player would. Instead, they will place a new Borg assimilation node around the spires in play and can generate a new Borg cube. With the Borg Transworld Hub, if it is in play and it doesn't have a cube on it, then roll to see if it will generate a new cube. When it comes to a Borg system, it is a system that possesses a Borg spire on it and will take an action during the Borg build phase. However, this is dependent upon the state of the spire. During the Borg build phase, first C of the Transwarp hub will generate a new cube. Second, place a new Borg assimilation node around each spire, where each spire has the potential of generating its own new Borg cube. If the Transwarp hub is in play, then remove one delay token from it. But if there are no delay tokens found on it, then roll to see if it creates a new Borg cube. But if it already possesses a Borg cube, then don't roll to see if it adds a new one. If there isn't a Borg cube found upon the Borg Transwarp hub, then roll a die, adding the number of Borg generation tokens to the roll. If the resulting number is greater than the number of cubes that are found upon the map, then the Transwarp hub will generate a new Borg cube. But if no Borg cube is generated for one reason or another, then place a cube generation token upon the Transwarp hub. But once a new Borg cube is generated, then remove all said tokens. When a Borg system less than 3 assimilation nodes, then an additional node is to be built upon it during the Borg's build phase. But when the Borg system possesses 3 assimilation nodes, but no cube is found atop of the spire, then a cube is to be placed atop of it. With Borg systems that have a Borg cube found atop of its spire, then it will launch its cube into orbit, followed by having all of the assimilation nodes removed unless there is a Borg cube already found in orbit within that Borg system. In that case, leave the Borg cube atop of the spire until the next Borg building phase. And if there are already 5 cubes found upon the board, then no new cubes are to be built. During the Borg's command phase, the assimilated players will draw from the command deck in order to determine what each Borg cube will do during the Borg turn. When there are multiple Borg cubes found in play and there are no assimilated players, the players will take turns selecting a cube to activate, which is to occur in player turn order. After a command is used, it gets discarded into the discard pile. When all the command cards have been drawn and the Borg needs to draw more command cards, then the discard pile will be reshuffled. When moving Borg cube and there are no assimilated players, it may require some players to disclose their turn order before it's their actual turn within the game. In this case, the activated cube will be selected before its command card is to be drawn. If there are any assimilated players, then each assimilated player will draw a number of command cards on their turn equal to the number of Borg cubes found in play. After drawing these cards, the assimilated player will choose the order in which each Borg cube will activate. Each player will then fully resolve the activation for each cube before they move onto the next cube. And when taking each of the Borg's activations, the assimilated player can choose which of their drawn command cards they want to execute with each cube. After the Borg build phase, activate each cube in play. When activated, each cube will do the following. First, the cube will engage any eligible player ship in space combat. Second, a Borg command card is drawn and have that cube execute the command found upon it. Many of the command cards consist of movements and will indicate both a target and a warp movement. Some cards can even cause a cube to move past or away from a system that has already been developed. Third, begin the simulation process of a developed system if it is possible. With the resolving of each activation, each cube will fully perform before moving onto the next cube. After each cube completes its actions, place a Borg token upon the cube as a means of indicating that the cube has activated. When all of the cubes have completed their actions, the Borg's turn will be over. With some Borg command cards, they will cause multiple cubes to be moved. In situations like this, remove all the cubes, regardless if they activated or not this turn, followed by completing the action of the cube which drew the card. Only the cube that drew the Borg command card will receive the Borg token as a result of this movement. If the other cubes have yet to activate, they will still get to activate later in the Borg's turn. If the Borg cube draws an Assimilation Expedited card, then it will not move as a result of this card, but it can still move as a result of other Borg command cards. And when there are more than one Borg cube that is in play, then the players will take turns choosing which cube to activate based upon the turn order. But if the Learn Field Disruption card is played, then the Borg's turn will immediately end. With the Borg's command phase, it looks like this. Step 1. If there aren't any targets that the cube can attack, it will explore, moving to Step 6. Step 2. If the cube is able to reach a target, it will move to the closest target and its movement. Step 3. If the target is too far away for the cube to reach in a single movement and the entire path is unblocked, then it will complete its entire warp movement toward the closest target and along the shortest route possible. From there, it will end its movement. Step 4. The cube will explore a new space lane, make a connection, and then move to a target or place a new system at the end of the space lane. From there, it will end its movement. But if all movement alternatives fail, then the cube will cease its movement. When an exploring cube places a new space lane from its current sector, it will do so, rolling and generating a new space lane with the aim of creating a new connection between any systems in the accompanying space lane, including the one they are in, to allow it to move to and reach its closest matching target. When stringing systems in space lanes, it will only string them enough to make a placement or connection. It cannot string a system or space lane further than the minimum needed amount. In order to determine how to string space lanes and systems, it can be useful to test possible placement and attachments. If it's hard to determine which constitutes the minimum amount of string possible, then it is up to the player who activated the Borg cube to make the final decision. This doesn't necessarily include the target that would be closer at the start of its movement. If a target is reached, then the Borg's movement will end. But if the target is unable to be reached due to a ship or another cube found within the target sector, then the closest adjacent sector will be used instead, assuming that the cube is able to reach it. If it's not able to do so, then the cube will try and place a new system, move to it, and in its movement, draw an exploration card if it's applicable to do so. And finally, Step 5. Reassign the target and start over at Step 1. If the cube was unable to complete its movement in any of the previous steps, then it will be assigned a new target provided that it hasn't already had the player ship as its target. If so, then start the movement process over from Step 1. If the Borg cube already has the nearest player ship as its target, then the nearest Borg cube will then become its nearest target, starting the movement process over with Step 1. If its target was reached, the other Borg cube will then automatically activate under collective efficiency. If the Borg cube in question already has the nearest ship and nearest Borg cube as targets and is located in a sector where exploration will be impossible, then it will be reassigned its original command card target. From there, it will try to move to the nearest system it can reach and where exploration is possible. From there, go to Step 4. In regards to collective linkage and the move collective command cards, they instruct the player to move multiple cubes. This will mean that all of the cubes will move regardless if they have already activated or not this turn. Once that's done, complete the activation of the cube that was activated by the selected card. With that said, Borg cubes are capable of flying past each other as long as they have enough movement and their paths aren't blocked. Moving cubes will also not be able to reach a target sector that already has a Borg cube found within it. Instead, it will reach the closest adjacent sector. For the movement command cards, they will indicate what the target type is as well as what the warp movement is. If the Borg cube has failed each of the aforementioned alternatives, it will end its movement where it is stationary, even if it was activated one or more times during the Borg's turn. Regardless, this will count as an activation of the new cube and will be marked as such unless it already has been marked as activated. If the Borg telemetry node card is used during an assimilated player's turn, then they will have to discard the Borg command card they are trying to execute and draw a new card. The player will then have to choose a new command for the active cube. If the Borg takes an extra turn due to the command resurgent card, then the assimilated player, if there are any, will take turns selecting a cube to activate. When all of the Borg command cards have been drawn, then shuffle the discarded cards in order to create new Borg command deck. When the terms nearest, closest, or shortest appear upon a Borg card or within the movement rules, they generally mean the nearest as determined by warp movement distance, ignoring any blocking ships. If a tie occurs, then use the fewest sectors. If this is still a tie, then the player who activated the cube will select the route from the equidistant sectors. There will be some Borg exploration cards that will nominate the nearest Borg cube to be moved to a system. If there are Borg cubes found upon the play area but no connections to the new system, then the cube is to be placed in the system instead. Otherwise, the nearest connected cube will teleport to the system, regardless of the distance or if there are blocking ships. When the Borg cube activates, it will begin by initiating a space battle with all player ships that are found in that sector or adjacent sectors. And it will engage in these space battles simultaneously, even if there are ships belonging to multiple players. When engaging in combat with multiple players, then all players will have to direct their attacks against the Borg cube. When in combat, the Borg will have a number of special rules that they will have to follow. First, the players will always have first strike against the Borg cube during the first round of combat in space battles and planetary assimilation. This holds true regardless of who initiated the attack. Second, Borg cube will start their space battle with 9 attack dice. When the Borg takes damage, they will lose attack dice. When it's time for a Borg to attack, they will roll all of the remaining attack dice, ignoring the dice that were removed due to damage. Third, when in combat, Borg cubes will not retreat. They will fight until they win or get destroyed. Fourth, when starting each space battle or planetary invasion, the Borg cube will always have a shield modifier of 0. When each round of combat comes to an end, the cube shield modifier will be increased by 1. Place a Borg assimilation node upon the Borg cube card in order to track current shield modifier, maxing out at 4. After they take casualties, if the Borg shields have reached the point where the player's ships can only hit on a 7 or better, then said player will have to retreat. When players retreat from the Borg during a space battle, then they will have to move so that they are no longer found in an adjacent sector to the cube. But if they cannot move to such a sector for any reason when retreating, then they get destroyed. 5th, whenever a Borg cube takes damage, place one of their attack dice onto the Borg cube card. This is to keep track of how much damage that the cube has taken. Because of this, dice found on the cube card cannot be used during the attack. 6th, with the Borg's hit roll, it is dependent upon how many spires are found on the board as shown upon the Borg command console. The Borg console also gives the Borg special rules and their weapon level. When there are no spires, they hit upon 5+. When there is 1 spire, they hit upon 4+. When there are 2 spires, they hit upon 3+. When there are 3 spires, they hit upon 2+. And when there are 4 or 5 spires, they hit upon 1+. If there are simulated players, they will allocate hits from the Borg. Otherwise, the player will take the hits that are allocated to them to their own ships. If there are multiple defenders that are facing the Borg, then they will take turns allocating hits in player turn order. This continues until all the hits have been allocated. 7th, since the Borg possess advanced weaponry, the weapons will ignore all shield unless the target player possesses tech or an advancement that will specifically work against the Borg. 8th, whenever a Borg attack rolls a 6, which is represented by the Borg symbol on the Borg faction dice, during space battle or planetary invasion, they will both score a hit against the player as well as regenerate 1 damage, assuming that the player's hit will not destroy the cube. When regenerating damage, each 6 the Borg has rolled during the attack will cause 1 die from the cube card to be added back to their pool of attack dice for the following round. It is worth noting that the Borg cube cannot roll more than 9 attack dice. 9th, when the Borg cube wins a space battle, it does not perform a tactical maneuver. In addition to this, a damaged cube that wins a battle will begin the next battle back at full health with 9 attack dice. 10th, when a Borg cube sustains 9 damage and all of its dice have been placed upon the cube card, then the cube is destroyed. From there, all players that participated in the space battle, including those who failed to hit or get destroyed, will draw a Borg tech card. When it comes to the Borg tech cards, they are obtained when a player destroys a Borg cube or reclaims a Borg system and represents a new way to combat the Borg. With many of the Borg tech cards, they possess a research cost and are placed directly into the player's advancement area. But there are some Borg tech cards that have research costs and are placed into the player's project area until they have been completed or are discarded to make room for other advancements. Many of the Borg tech cards will require the player to discard the card in order to use their ability. When discarding the Borg tech card, place the card at the bottom of the Borg tech deck. This card can be exhausted during the Borg turn in order to discard a drawn Borg command card and draw a different command card. After a Borg cube has engaged any of the player ships, a Borg command card is to be drawn for that cube. Although many of the command cards are movement cards, some have other instructions. When it comes to that of the Borg movement cards, they possess a target system and a warp range. When they move, the Borg cube travels at warp, and since they have Borg transwarp technology, they are able to move through phenomena that would otherwise prevent warp movement. When a movement card is drawn, move the Borg cube toward the target system as described upon the movement card. The cube will then move at warp the number of warp tokens that are shown upon the drawn card. There are some movement cards that can cause the cube to move past or away from the orbit of a developed system. If there are 2 or more systems that could be the target of a cube, move the cube toward the one that can be reached through the route that possesses the fewest sectors, even if that route has more space lanes. If this is a tie, then have the cube move toward the system that is controlled by a player that has the lowest turn order. Unlike player's ship, Borg cubes cannot move through a player's ship. If a cube's movement will take it past the player's ship, then it will come to a halt in the adjacent sector. And if the ship is at a transwarp conduit, the cube will move toward the transwarp conduit and stop. With any given sector, it cannot contain more than 1 cube at any given time. If a cube's movement causes it to end in the same sector of another cube, then it will stop in the sector found just before the one that is occupied by the other cube. When the moving cube's action is complete, place a Borg token on it in order to indicate that it activated. From there, activate the other cube even if it had already activated this turn. When doing this, do not place a Borg token upon the second cube. If it has not activated this turn, then it will activate as normal later within the Borg's turn. With the transwarp hub system disk, it connects to both of the transwarp conduit system disks. Both the players and the Borg can warp from the hub, either of the conduits, and vice versa. Treat them as if they were connected via a space lane. It is worth noting that the conduits are not connected to each other and that attacks are not allowed between the hub and the conduits. Movement is also allowed between the hub and the conduits, even if they contain hostile rival ship, but only for the Borg. If the hub is the shortest available route to the target system, then the Borg will use it. When counting the number of sectors found between systems in order to detect which one is closer, count the transwarp hub as being 1 sector from each transwarp conduit. But they are not adjacent sectors and the player cannot attack from one to the other. Instead, they are required to move to an opponent's transwarp hub or conduit in order to attack from there. When a cube isn't connected to its target by a space lane, or there isn't a target of the type that is listed for, it will move to the nearest system unless already occupying a system. From there, it will place a new space lane that is pointed directly toward the home system of the player who has the lowest turn order as possible. If a floating system can be swung in order to connect a new space lane to an existing system so that the cube can make its way to the target, then do so. But if the player is unable to do so, place a new system at the end of the new space lane. When the Borg places a new system, then they will stop their movement and explore the system and reveal a new exploration card. If they discovered a new civilization, develop the system normally. The Borg will also ignore the Ally, Crisis, and Discovery cards. Place cards that remain in play on the system. When discarding Ally cards, place them at the bottom of the exploration deck. All the cards are placed into the discard pile. If the card is not connected to its target system and it cannot place a new space lane and system for any reason, then the cube will move along a randomly selected space lane to the next system instead. It is worth noting that the Borg are more likely to place a new system when the Transfer Pub begins the game upon the table. When the Borg are done with their command, a Borg cube will try and assimilate any developed system that the cube is occupying, and this counts as a planetary invasion. When they invade, it starts with 9 attack dice, ignoring shields, with the system being assimilated, rolling a die for each of its nodes. Since the Borg aren't interested in capturing nodes, each Borg hit will already destroy the nodes. If the Borg are being controlled by an assimilated player, then the player will decide which node will be destroyed. Otherwise, the player who is in control of the system will decide which nodes will be destroyed. For independent systems, then the player who activated the cube will allocate the hits. When attacking, the Borg cube will strike the resource node first, followed by destroying the starbase if present. From there, the control node will be attacked as the next target. If a system possesses a starbase, it will roll an additional die in order to resist assimilation. Since the starbase counts as an additional node on the system, it will have to be destroyed in order for assimilation to be successful. For systems that are assimilated by the Borg and possess the starbase is removed and cannot be rebuilt during the game. Destroying a starbase will also cause a Borg assimilation node to be added for every Borg spire found in play. Since the Borg are not interested in negotiation, Vulcan ambassadors will have no effect upon the Borg assimilation attempt. If the assimilation is successful, then the ambassador will be destroyed. If a Borg cube destroys all of the nodes found within a system, then the Borg spire will be placed upon the system. During future Borg building phases, a Borg assimilation node is to be added to the system. Once 3 Borg assimilation nodes have been constructed, the system will be fully assimilated, causing a new Borg cube to be constructed. With Borg systems, they can be invaded in an attempt to eradicate the Borg presence, with any and all factions being allowed to try and reclaim a Borg system. In order to successfully reclaim a Borg system, the player will have to roll enough hits to result in total annihilation or successful invasion. Regarding spires, assimilation nodes, and cubes found atop a spire, they all count as nodes and structures. It is worth noting that if a cube is found atop of a spire, it does not count as a ship. Unlike combat with a cube, players will not have first strike when they are attacking a Borg system. In addition to this, the Borg are able to shrug off lateral damage, so if a player rolls fewer hits than there are structures found upon the planet, the attack will not have any effect and no nodes are destroyed. When players have fewer ships than there are Borg structures, then the player will not be able to reclaim the Borg system. When a player achieves total annihilation or successfully invades the system, all of the Borg structures are removed from it. The player will also not place a player control node into the system. This is due to the Borg too heavily damaging the system in question while they are there, requiring it to be recolonized by a player. With the player who claimed the system, he will draw a Borg tech card. Borg worlds are also unable to be the target of hegemony. When it comes to a Borg system, it possesses a shield modifier, with this modifier being equal to the number of Borg assimilation nodes found upon that given system. When in combat, a Borg node is added to the system after each combat round. This will increase the Borg shields and will bring the system that much closer to building a new cube. With a Borg system, it can never have more than 3 assimilation nodes found upon it. With a system that has 3 assimilation nodes on it during the build phase, the system will create a new cube. When playing with the Borg, a player that connects to any Borg cube or Borg system has made first contact, thus allowing them to start bidding for turn order. And when a player's ship comes across a Borg cube, it will block their movement just like a ship that belongs to another player. When your Borg cube enters a hazardous system, they remain unaffected. Because of this, they do not roll to see if they take any damage. With systems that possess a Borg spire, they will not count as a developed system or a home system when it comes to that of determining where to move a Borg cube. And if a spire possesses 3 assimilation nodes and there are already 5 cubes found in play, leave the assimilation nodes in place. Once a Borg cube is destroyed, then it will become available to place it upon the spire during the future Borg build phase. When it comes to that of the Borg Tech deck, it doesn't count as an advancement deck, despite each card that is drawn being played as an advancement. Advancements that allow the player to draw from a rival's advancement deck, it doesn't include the Borg deck cards, thus preventing the player from drawing from this deck. With advancements that apply to any rival ship or to rival, they also apply to the Borg. With advancements that automatically destroy a rival ship, they will do 1 damage to the cube for each ship that is destroyed. With advancements that cause a rival to roll a die for each of the ships, it will cause the Borg to roll once for a Borg cube. In games that consist of 1 or 2 players, some advancements are not particularly useful. In order to help avoid this, use the focused research advanced rules that allow the players to look through their advancement deck and choose 1 advancement instead of randomly drawing 2. And as usual, when the Ferengi have a ship in orbit around a Borg system, they will gain production. With the Klingons, they still can retreat from a battle, even against the Borg. But since they always hit on a result of 6, they still have the chance of defeating the Borg, and they get an additional culture token when they defeat a Borg cube. With the Klingon Marauder fleet, will take a single production token when it destroys a Borg cube. When a player attacks the Borg on their turn, other players are unable to join them in the attack. If players want to mount a coordinated defense against the Borg, then they will need to get their ship and fleets in place and then wait for the Borg to initiate the attack. With that taken care of, there are some optional rules that people can incorporate into their game that involves the Borg. First, when a Borg cube engages a player's ship, it can do this before and after exhausting a Borg command card. As a result of this, a Borg cube that executes the command aggression card will ignore the Borg's slow and methodical rule. Second, the players could reduce the number of spires the Borg need to win. In this situation, when the Borg have 3 spires on the board and are about to place a 4th, all the players have lost. Third, only allow a fleet that the player created to be used to block the movement of a Borg cube. Because of this, the individual ships are not able to block a Borg ship from moving. Fourth, place the transfer pub into the system's desk file instead of placing it into the center of the table during setup. But even though the transfer pub is in the system deck file, the players will still use the red Borg band and exploration cards. Fifth, deal out a number of non-Borg exploration cards equals to 3 times the number of players instead of twice the number to go atop of the exploration deck. Although players will know that the Borg are out there somewhere, this will give the players more time to explore the galaxy before they run the risk of encountering the Borg. Sixth, when the mystery turn order advanced rule is being used and there are no players that have been simulated, the player who will be going first for that turn will randomly draw a turn order card for the Borg. This player will have the option of keeping the Borg turn order secret until it is the Borg's turn to go. Seventh, when using the Humble Beginnings advanced rule, it can lead to a short game if the Borg are discovered early. To counter this, double the number of non-Borg exploration cards found at the top of the exploration deck, followed by shuffling the transfer pub into the bottom half of the system disc stack. Now that we've finished with the Borg, we can now talk about the Gamma Quadrant. When playing with the Gamma Quadrant, the Bajoran Idrin system and the Gamma Quadrant system disc are to be used in order to allow the players to use the Gamma Quadrant in their game. With the Gamma Quadrant, it can be added into the game if one of the players chooses to use the Dominion as their faction. If playing with the Gamma Quadrant, then the Dominion will have to make contact with all the factions through the Bajoran wormhole, including the Borg. With the systems used in the Gamma Quadrant, they are marked with the Gamma Quadrant symbol on both sides of the disk. They are also to be kept separate from the rest of the system disks, which are only used for the Alpha Quadrant. To set up the game with the incorporation of the Gamma Quadrant, place the wormhole system piece onto the board with Bajor found in the center and Idrin oriented so that it is closest to the Great Link. With this wormhole system, it consists of 2 parts, the Bajor system and the Idrin system, which are linked to the eponymous wormhole. Regarding Bajor, it is a planetary system found within the Alpha Quadrant, while Idrin is a phenomenon found within the Gamma Quadrant. It is worth noting that these 2 systems are not adjacent to each other. Instead, they are connected. Regarding the wormhole system, like the home worlds of each faction, it is fixed with Bajor starting off the game as an independent warp-capable civilization with 3 warp tokens found on it, a weapons head roll of 5+, and a shield modifier of 3. It also gets 2 culture nodes. Unlike most independent civilizations, Bajor comes with its own starbase in the form of Deep Space Nine. Because of this, when a player takes control of Bajor, they will gain control of the starbase and obtain a command token from it as if they have captured a starbase from another player. Because of the starbase, Bajor's hegemony resistance gets increased by 1, and if the Cardassian expansion is being used or has otherwise been incorporated into the collection of game pieces, remove the Bajor system that came with that expansion from the Alpha Quadrant stack. This is because the Bajor part of the wormhole system replaces it. From there, prepare the Gamma Quadrant system disk alongside but separate from the Alpha Quadrant system disk during setup. This includes separating the Gamma Quadrant Interstellar Phenomenon system disk from the Gamma Quadrant Planetary system disks. When that is done, set aside 2 random Gamma Quadrant Planetary system disks and then shuffle the remainder of the Gamma Quadrant Planetary systems together with all the Gamma Quadrant phenomena. When that is completed, place the Andorian Gamma Quadrant planetary systems atop of this stack. When it comes to exploring the Gamma Quadrant, it's done the same way as one would explore the Alpha Quadrant, where one would roll and place space lanes as normal. The difference is that players in the Gamma Quadrant can only pull from the Gamma Quadrant system stack. Gamma Quadrant systems can also only connect with other Gamma Quadrant systems, so Gamma Quadrant disks can never connect to an Alpha Quadrant disk and vice versa. It is worth noting that players are not allowed to place space lanes in systems in a way where it would make it impossible for Alpha Quadrant systems to connect with Bajor or Gamma Quadrant systems to connect with Idrin. When it comes to that of resolving the discovery of a planetary system and phenomenon, do so as normal. When drawing exploration cards in the Gamma Quadrant planetary system, do so from the Alpha Quadrant exploration deck. When it comes to that of moving through the wormhole, players are not allowed to do so at warp. Because of this, ships and fleets will have to exit out of warp when at Bajor or Idrin first. The player will then need to exhaust one command in order to move a ship or fleet from one side of the wormhole to the other. When traveling through the wormhole system, players are always allowed to travel between the two systems even if the system that is found on the other side of the wormhole is held by a hostile rival. Because of this, the hostile rival cannot prevent other players from entering the system through the wormhole. Rivals are not able to use ships found in the system to prevent other players from leaving the system. As of the writing of this episode, it is unclear if the Borg is allowed to go through the wormhole found on the Bajor Idrin system. The issue arises due to the wormhole requiring the issuing of commands to go through it. Since the Borg do not have any command available to use, as well as the current rules saying that a ship will have to exit out of warp when in Bajor or Idrin, this implies that they cannot go through the wormhole. It can also be argued that they are an Alpha Quadrant threat since their system disks are designed for the Alpha Quadrant system disk stack, not the Gamma Quadrant system disk stack. However, the Borg possess Borg warp technology which allows them to move through phenomena that would otherwise prohibit warp movement. And since the wormhole can be seen as a phenomena, albeit a unique one, it can be seen that the Borg can travel through the wormhole without a problem. Until we get official rules to help clarify the situation from Gale Force 9, we'll leave it up to the players on how to proceed with this in their given game. If players are playing the game without the Dominion but wish to have the Gamma Quadrant be part of the game, then the following rules are to be used. When setting up the game, don't place the wormhole system onto the board at the start of the game. Instead, when a player draws a phenomenon from the system disk stack, roll a space lane die. On the result of 4, replace the phenomenon with the wormhole system with the space lane connected to Bajor. From there, the players are able to explore the Gamma Quadrant. When placed, the wormhole system isn't fixed, but once another space lane is connected to the wormhole system on either Bajor or Idrin, then it will become fixed. So with that said, that is what you need to know about the variants of the game that are available for the quadrants found outside of the Alpha Quadrant and their affiliated factions. If you liked this episode, feel free to give it a like, and if you want to stay up to date on any future episodes we upload, go ahead and subscribe. You can also support us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/checkpointgaming. See you in the next episode, and happy gaming.